name's Peter Van Valkenburgh. I'm going to be moderating this panel, which is our regulatory perspectives panel. My background is that I'm the executive director of Coin Center, which is a nonprofit research and advocacy organization based in Washington, D.C., focused on public policy for crypto, trying to get it right with lawmakers and policymakers. I was formerly on the board of directors of the Zcash Foundation, stepped off that board so I could take on this ED role at Coin Center, which is my main gig. So we have a really great panel, some of my favorite people who work at the intersection of cryptocurrency and public policy, to hopefully have a rounded out discussion about where we think things are as far as the state of public policy and being able to build and use these technologies in the United States and internationally. And I'm really excited to ask them some questions and get their expertise and have a good talk. So I'm gonna go. I'll call folks' name because Zoom can be awkward as far as like left to right. We're not all sitting on a stage, sadly. I'd really like to see you all in person more often. But I'll go down the line. I'll call people's names, and they will give you a little bit of background on what they do and their connection to crypto and privacy tech. So I'll start with uh, immediately next to me on my screen, at least, is JW Verret. Go ahead, JW.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for the work you do at Coin Center. Really appreciate your fighting for our rights there. My name is JW Verret. I serve on the board of the Zcash Foundation, and I teach corporate securities banking law at George Mason Law School and do some expert work in white-collar litigation, defending people from the DOJ, including folks in crypto.
And DOJ is going to be a relevant factor in our discussions today. Next up is Paul Brigner.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Brigner. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Alliances at Electric Coin Company. I've been with Electric Coin for about 3 years. Did take a brief step away for a minute there, but glad to be back, for those of you who know that story. I always have, through that time, I've been on the board as well. Not the entire 3 years, but during that time I was away. I was still connected on the board of Bootstrap, the parent of Electric Coin Company.
And then Michele Korver.
Hi, everyone. Michele Korver. I'm the head of regulatory for the crypto fund over at Andreessen Horowitz. Many of you know it as A16Z, a VC fund out of Silicon Valley. I, for many years, and don't hold it against me, hopefully you'll find my input valuable, I spent a lot of my career at DOJ as a federal prosecutor. I'm working at the end of my prosecution points on money laundering and some crypto matters. And then working on crypto policy there, as well as at the Department of Treasury at FinCEN. I work now mostly helping developers to navigate all of the regulatory complexities we're going to talk about today. So I'm super excited for the conversation.
Michele is being modest. If everyone at the DOJ was as smart on this tech as Michele is, I think we'd have far less troubles. And finally, Kurt Opsahl.
Hey everybody, good to be back at ZCon. I was seeing you all in person, but great to be able to share this panel. So I'm Kurt Opsahl. I am the Associate General Counsel for Cybersecurity and Civil Liberties Policy at the Filecoin Foundation. I'm also part of the Financial Privacy Foundation, which with many of you are probably familiar. Part of also a Universal Privacy Association, and a bunch of other boards and advisory boards that I like to do. Prior to Filecoin Foundation, I was the general counsel at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and so I just came into the privacy space through that work, both on fighting for privacy and privacy enhancing technologies that make the privacy a realizable goal, including working on very important issues like code as speech to allow people to express themselves and their views on privacy in the world through creating code that will enable other people to have those privacy rights, because privacy rights are both normal and fundamental for the autonomy and existence of everybody.
Amen to that, Kurt. Kurt has also done years of yeoman's work, and the EFF has been, of course, one of the greatest champions on this issue, going all the way back to the days of the early internet. So we have 90 minutes. Kurt might drop off a little early, and I don't blame him. This is a long panel. He had a prior engagement. But because we have so much time, I want to make this conversational. And I also want to invite you, the audience, to go ahead and stick questions in the Zcon app, in the Hova chat. I've been told it's pronounced Hova. If those questions sort of fit into what we're discussing, and I think that they're a really valuable part of the ongoing conversation, I'll just interject as we go. So we're not going to necessarily wait till the end for questions. But yeah, so just to lead off the discussion, I think, it's one of those strange, very strange sea change moments in public policy. And obviously not just about crypto, about a lot of issues. And there are opportunities and there are risks with a new Congress and with a new administration. And we're seeing a lot of things happen very fast, sometimes alarmingly fast. So just I wanted to lead off with a general question before we get to what's changing or where we're optimistic. Just right now, from your perspectives, where do you think we have the biggest threats in the US facing privacy developers and projects today? Who wants to take that? Who wants to take a first stab at it?
Okay, I'll go first, for God's sakes. So I don't think this is new. I think this has been consistent for the entire time that I've worked in this space. And I would say the persistent fear and focus by policymakers on the bad activity over all of the other great stuff and the importance of privacy. I think that's a kind of a big kind of theme that we've seen for many years that unfortunately still exists. I would say that the new threat that I did not see coming is the lack of clarity, but not related to the securities laws. That's hopefully going by the wayside shortly with some new legislation and more reasonable regulators. But the lack of clarity that we now have relating to criminal prosecutions and anti-money laundering regulations. And I know we're going to talk about that a lot today. So I would say from my perspective, I think that is probably the biggest new threat that we're going to be thinking about and we should be focusing on.
So as add to that, yes, and I think over the many years, I don't know if this is a new threat, but just to highlight this, we've had a lot of tension between law enforcement, who sort of say as technologies develop that provide people with privacy, will claim to be going dark, was a term used by the DOJ, FBI. Which is, somewhat ironic, and sort of is a golden age of surveillance with more ability to surveil people electronically than ever before, and find out the minute details of their digital lives. And then you put a few encryption wrappers around that information to give people a semblance of the privacy they might have had just walking down the street in the ordinary life 30 years ago, and they'll claim to be going dark. And where this has come up sort of again and again over the last 25 or so years, maybe 30 years at this point, is fights over the availability of strong encryption that doesn't have a backdoor. And that fight continues to this day. And if the government can regulate and insert a backdoor into cryptography, it is essentially breaking the math, breaking the security. And that security is a lot of what we depend on to use technology and maintain our privacy.
Yeah, I agree, Kurt. I like your framing, that it was a golden age of surveillance. I think a lot of people, I know some of the rhetoric we use sometimes is well, this technology is now out of the box. You can't put it back in the box. And that's, that it's not always the most persuasive argument because people want to put it back in the box. But the real box here, if there's a Pandora's box, it's the sudden availability of surveillable data in the form of online and electronic communications. it's hard to put that back in the box to actually start reclaiming some level of privacy over our personal information after just, you know, once people started doing everything over the phone and over the wires, suddenly you didn't really have any opportunity for private conversations anymore. Um, yeah, and you're right that we shouldn't lose focus on that more fundamental issue in cryptography regulation rather than cryptocurrency regulation. You know, just the question of strong encryption is still totally on the table. Look at what's happening in the UK right now. I don't know if anybody actually wants to chat about the UK stuff. It might be interesting to our audience, and I don't have a real quick summary on it. We didn't prepare notes on that, so none of you are on the hook for this test if you don't.
It's disappointing that the United Kingdom went to put pressure onto Apple to reduce the strength of its uh, cryptography. And what Apple ended up doing was no longer offering the encrypted iCloud service in the UK, which is um, in a sense, a compromise. In that sense, is that they didn't want to say that it was encrypted when it had broken encryption, and chose rather to not offer it, so at least people knew what they were going to get in the UK. But the UK has been pushing on this kind of thing for a long time. GCHQ, so well, they may cut their teeth a long time ago breaking encryption, and maybe they got tired of it and they want to have backdoors to make it easier. Um, but that has been the tension. But just to sort of earn it around, it's not just about breaking encryption to have some private and interrupt those private conversations or listen to them, but also the concept of putting a backdoor in cryptography is dangerous when you're using that cryptography for other things. So, cryptocurrencies use techniques of cryptography also for verification, for signing things. Like there's a lot of additional features that you can use with that math technology. And if those can be backdoored so that a third party could get in and adjust what the results, that can break some of the fundamental assumptions of trustlessness, or what is dependent upon for a lot of blockchain projects, that you can trust the code to operate as expected, if that code could potentially be ordered through potential a secret order to be backdoored.
Yeah, I think there's that foundational discussion, which we can talk more about. Uh, are the underlying tools and technologies secure? Are people allowed to build them and publish them as scientific research? Because strong encryption really is scientific research for figuring out new tools and techniques for human flourishing. And there, maybe there is a division between UK and US policy long term, because in the US we have certain First Amendment guarantees that protect that speech act of, you know, inventing new things and sharing the fruits of your inventions with folks. And then there's this other question, and Michele was getting at this when she suggested that one of the big threats, apart from just the sort of maybe too exclusive focus on the bad acts that people do with the technology, is also this question of when are you just publishing software, or when are you starting to move into a realm of activities that is a regulated activity, even if most of what you're doing is publishing software? When are you potentially on the hook for an unlicensed money transmission prosecution because you built software tools that others used to move money? Um, Coin Center's director of communications, Niraj Agarwal, has a great tweet that I think he's had pinned to his account forever. That's something like, "I'm sorry that your warrantless surveillance regime was predicated on the assumption that there'd always be trusted intermediaries." And so there's a question of how strong is the peer-to-peer tech, as far as like, can it be forced to be broken or made broken? And then how much can we do peer-to-peer versus through an intermediary? Because the more we do through peer-to-peer tech and the less through intermediaries, the less traditional avenues we have for things like data collection and surveillance, warrantless or potentially even with warrants. I want to bring in Paul and JW. Both of you have probably more experience than the rest of us on the panel, who are more sort of um, egghead policy people now at working with companies and facing actual like requests for information or having to interface with policymakers about the specific project that you're working on. Where have you seen threats over the last few years? Have the nature of those threats changed? Are you optimistic? Are you feeling confident? Maybe I'll put Paul on the spot first.
Yeah, I have some ideas about threats, maybe from a little bit different angle, and certainly I do agree with the concerns over the criminal prosecutions. But to be honest, what I am most concerned about at this time is the credibility of the industry at large, and being able to demonstrate that we're all actually building things that are trying to transform and the financial system and provide for people to have more control over their assets and more privacy, instead of pumping and dumping the latest coin. And unfortunately, I am afraid that we're just going to see more of the latter, at least in the near term. So for those who want to play that game, get your stable coins ready and get ready to pull the trigger, because I suspect it's going to happen any moment now again, where we're going to have another pump and dump, where it could even come from the highest levels, which is kind of scary. So my concern is just about demonstrating that we're here to build things that are really good for the world and that are delivering on that mission. One thing that was said earlier about the Apple in the UK, ironically, that's a thing that I feel very optimistic about. I was glad to see Apple do what they did, even though can be viewed as a compromise. But what really encouraged me is that in the U.S. government, you had the Director of National Intelligence come out and say that the UK had actually tried to put in a backdoor, just calling it out for what it was, and the risks to national security because of that. So I think that was maybe the first time something like that happened at that high of a level, and I think even the administration chimed in support of that. So I know we're not talking about all the reasons to be optimistic. There are a lot of them, but to me, that was one of the biggest so far this year, at least in support of encryption and privacy.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your first point, definitely taken, about sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot or we need to get our house in order. I mean, crypto is just a big permissionless movement, so people can build what they want to build. And unfortunately, some of the things that gain traction aren't the most savory aspects of what our capabilities can actually make possible. I think in addition to sort of the silliness of some of the more casino-like projects in the space, we also should be mindful of where we've failed to live up to our own principles of robust security. I think the Bybit hack. Sorry, I don't know why I have trouble with that one. The name, too many B's. The Bybit hack is just another horrible situation where there's large amounts of money now falling into the hands of North Korea because of poor security. And that doesn't mean that software developers should be regulated like financial institutions. And that choice, if that was one of the choices that's part of the blowback from this, would not even solve that problem, but it certainly makes it difficult to have really careful discussions about national security when you've got such bad facts on the ground as far as the wrong people getting the benefits of these new networks and new assets. JW?
I've gone from, I think I was at apocalyptic for a few years and just figuring I'm just going to ride this movement to zero and just go down with the ship, to just pessimistic. I remain pessimistic. I do believe that all the personnel selections in the Trump administration are great for crypto. And over the next 4 years, they're not going to engage in this bad faith effort to destroy us. I believe they want to do the right thing. I mean, it's a great news that the Treasury Department has an announcement about the Beneficial Ownership Act, the Corporate Transparency Act, that they are going to rip the cords out of the inside of that machine, and just have redo it so only foreign actors have to comply. That's terrific. And let's remember, the current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was the champion of that legislation. And I think it was implemented by Treasury in a bad faith way, well beyond what he had intended. But it says something that this administration said, no, we're just gonna cut it. That's great. Under Brian Quintenz, I think CFTC's going to aim to do the right thing as best it can. Same with SEC. We'll see if SEC and CFTC go as far as I would like. I mean, I would like something like when a broker deals in crypto for a client, I think they should be encouraged to teach their clients about Zcash and about Tornadocash and use them to protect their clients' privacy. I would go that far, but we'll see how far we can go, but it's going in the right direction. I think that under the Trump administration, the president's been the target of lawfare for years, and that theme comes down through to the line level prosecutors, which is great. But the fact remains, SDNY's position, and this is a position that I think probably would have won the day, at least in district court, their position in Tornadocash effectively is the same thing as saying that they believe they have the discretion to charge everyone in DeFi with unlicensed money transmission and conspiracy to commit unlicensed money transmission. That means they believe they have the authority to put anyone in DeFi in jail for 10 years. I don't think that's an exaggeration at all of their exaggerated reading of the Tornadocash filing. The only way to change that is either precedent, and hopefully we're not going to prosecute them anymore, so we won't get any legal precedent. Hopefully those are just going to get dropped, or statutory reform. And so I'm not going to feel optimistic at all until we have criminal statutory reform to money transmitter law and to money laundering law. I've been involved in cases where I've watched, just anything. A kernel gets you to conspiracy and gets you to conviction. And money laundering charges just get added like candy on the back end of anything that involves crypto. What they did to Nate Chastain, for example, was just a horrendous abuse of power. That guy wasn't laundering money. Extra hops on chain aren't money laundering on a surveillable chain that's easily surveilled by Chainalysis in a report. How is that money laundering? I don't know. It's just, without statutory reform, we will never be free of that risk of abusive discretion. So I'm not able to get optimistic. What we can do is we can minimize our risk as developers and as communities. Be careful about how we communicate things. Don't have that hot tweet that's snarky and it isn't even really true, but jokes about criminality. Don't have that in the community at all. That will help with risk reduction, but the risk is there and the ability to abuse discretion is there. And so I remain a pessimist.
Oh, that's really helpful, JW. I'm glad you brought up some of those specific cases too. I think for the audience that may not be steeped in all of the ongoing legal battles, probably the broadest theory of what is money transmission and who in these communities is potentially liable for conspiracy to do unlicensed money transmission are exemplified by US v. Storm, which is where the prosecution is going after one of the developers of Tornadocash, two of the developers actually, and US v. Rodriguez, where the DOJ is going after the developers of the Samurai wallet, a Bitcoin wallet that used confidential transactions in order to increase privacy there. And these are, I would be sort of foolishly optimistic or foolishly bullish about the legal arguments to say that these are easy cases and that the DOJ is totally off base here. These are hard cases, I think, because, in both the Tornadocash case and the Samurai wallet case, these developers, they didn't just publish a GitHub repository. They published software on chain in the Tornadocash case. They maintained front-end websites that gave people easier access to the software tools that they invented. And in the Wasabi wallet case, they may have maintained a coordinating server for matching people who want to make private transactions. And the legal reasoning here that's really hard to work through boils down to, at what point do you stop just providing tools for a general purpose, and at what point do you develop some sort of specific knowledge as to what people are going to do with those tools, which makes you potentially culpable for the things that people do with those tools? I still think in both prosecutions, the government is off base and that those folks deserve, at the very least, the benefit of the rule of lenity, because, the relevant regulator, FinCEN, had said quite clearly that you're not doing money transmission if you don't have independent control over customer funds. So charging them with unlicensed money transmission or unregistered money transmission, to me, there's a problem with the fundamental rule of law. But I'm seeing JW's unmuted himself. You want to come back in on this?
Well, yeah, those are all the core issues. And then there's an additional set of of tangential issues that just multiply by exponential factor prosecutorial discretion. So, for example, one of the cases I was a part of, U.S. versus Sterling, which was another abuse of power. I watched the prosecution tell the jury, if this kid bought the website, the clear domain website in 2011, that was used to point people to Bitcoin fog on the dark web, if all he did was buy the website domain and then stepped away, but never actually formally like emailed the people who were running Bitcoin fog and said, I withdraw from the conspiracy, we got him on conspiracy. We can toll the statute of limitations for 15 years to get him. And that's how they got him. And he's going to do 12 years for that. And all they really had to prove was that maybe he bought the website 13 years ago that was later used to point people to the dark web. It's amazing.
Yeah. Criminal liability is not a scalpel. It's a blunt instrument. JW, you got this going, and I'm thankful for that. Sort of identifying where you see there being some changes from the Biden administration to the Trump administration now. We can also talk about from the last Congress to the new Congress. I want to open this up to whoever wants to take it, but what else do you think, besides some of the things that JW mentioned, what else has gotten better? Ostensibly, this administration's more pro-crypto. At least that's what there's a lot of news and reporting and statements about. Where do you think that they've not shown improvement, or maybe even put us in a potentially worse situation, if you think there are areas there?
I think somebody has to call out the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because that's been the big news as of late. And I actually wasn't so concerned about a Bitcoin reserve, but some of what we saw over this last weekend disturbed me quite a bit. And so, things like that, I think demonstrate that there may be a lack of understanding of our space that's a lot deeper than I realized. And so, things like that make me pause and say, are we really on the right track? And we have a big meeting coming up on Friday where the White House is pulling together some very high-profile people in the industry. So, I'm hopeful, but we don't know who's going to be there yet. There's no list of who's going to attend. Someone pointed out that, it wasn't focused on people that are building the tech necessarily. So, I really think that I'm at a wait and see point to see, how does this go with the administration? I do agree that with JW, I think the appointments and everything that's happening at the agency level is truly outstanding. That's why I'm overall optimistic. So perhaps it's just that I need to develop a better way of dealing with the noise and ignore some things that are happening in the industry too.
I think there's a certain natural ickiness of what happens on crypto Twitter in response to any rumor about a strategic reserve, right? Because a lot of people have allegiances to different coins and different projects, and it starts to look a lot like rent seeking. Like, oh, can I get my thing bought as part of the U.S. Treasury? And I agree. I think that brings out a lot of the worst things in our community, and certainly we wouldn't want to lose focus on the important issues of things like criminal liability for software developers, because we're having these fights over what goes in the SBR, if you will. Michelle, were you were you about to say something about?
No, what I can say is that having spent a good part of my career, the bulk of my career in the government, the one thing that I worry about, and I hope will not happen, is that we get sucked into the vortex of high-level people in meetings and book reports, as I like to call them, studies. I find that those tend to waste time and effort from focusing on action. I think that there are opportunities for statutory reform across a lot of the various legal issues that we are facing in the blockchain space. And so, and also there are many career folks with expertise within the government that are still there, maybe, and who think that this technology is awesome, that don't abuse their authorities, that have been kind of the quiet champions. And we may talk about this a little later because there are so many benefits to privacy technology for accomplishing the goals that policymakers and law enforcement have as well. And so I just hope that the voices of the developers in private sector, the voices of the career experts who actually believe in the technology will not be drowned out by by all of the people in charge, and that they will not get sucked into having meetings and fighting amongst the agencies as to who gets jurisdiction, and we can actually like have a concrete plan to move forward while we have the chance to do it.
Yeah. I know for my part, just to echo what both you and JW have said, and Paul as well, the work at the agencies has been encouraging. I think most notably what's going on at the SEC is basically day and night. You went from multiple very aggressive civil action prosecutions or actions rather against seemingly some of the better actors in the space with regards to an attempt to fit into and reasonably comply with relevant investor protection rules. So a really aggressive posture to Hester Peirce, who is one of my favorite people. Doesn't hurt that she's a commissioner at the SEC, but I would hang out with her no matter what. To her asking for, I think it was 48 or 49 incredibly sensitive and nuanced questions about how the technology works, just as a perfunctory matter before they decide exactly how they can offer the best clear guidance on this. To me, it's a very different approach than an SEC that just wants to assume that the technology hasn't changed and that all the same rules should apply to these people, even though they're doing very different things. Where I think I agree with the group that it's a lot less clear is on questions of things like the unlicensed money transmission prosecutions and the illicit finance issues. I think the appointments at Treasury look really promising. They seem very serious and committed to taking a reasonable approach. But, unlicensed money transmission prosecutions at the DOJ are ongoing. It would be fairly unprecedented for a new administration to drop those prosecutions, although it's kind of exactly what seems to be happening with Eric Adams in the Southern District of New York. So it seems like they're willing to do that in certain cases. And I think it would just also be great to get greater clarity from some of the agencies and groups that have in the past been like full of staff that's wanted to do good work and just wanted to go after the real bad guys and not waste time on a wild goose chase going after software developers. FinCEN's 2019 guidance remains to me one of the best documents in the space as far as trying to set out clear expectations as to who's going to be obligated and who's actually just doing software development. But in many ways, that guidance is in conflict with the DOJ's position on unlicensed money transmission. So maybe there's an opportunity for clarity there. I know I'm talking a lot as a moderator. I have a bad habit of doing this. I will put in a brief plug. JW, you were saying that we need statutory clarity. We need to amend 18 U.S.C. 1960. I would love to see that. I do think there is still an opportunity to work in the courts, though, and Coin Center is supporting a young man in Texas, Michael Llewellyn, who's a brilliant security expert on smart contracts, and it wants to release a protocol for private crowdfunding, but wants to sue the DOJ to get clarity as to whether he needs to register as a money transmitter before he publishes that protocol. So I think, the Southern District of New York might be quite hostile right now. They're fairly, friendly to prosecutors, especially in financial crimes cases. It's nice that we can bring some balance and bring an action for declarative judgment in Fort Worth, Texas, where Michael's lived his whole life. So I'm hopeful for that as well.
This might be a good moment for me to plug the PGP for crypto meetings that we've had recently, where Peter, you attended, and we had Michael Llewellyn there speaking. If anyone wants more detail on that, that's probably a great resource for you to go to YouTube, the PGP for crypto channel, and watch that. That was a month ago, but just recently we had another PGP meeting out there. So good work is continuing with bringing the community together through that initiative. Thanks for doing that, Peter, by the way.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yes,
As
add on.
usual, what you're doing there, Peter, Coin Center is doing is way more important than the top 30 news items in crypto or the strategic reserve or even in the bills or anything. That's the most important one right there. And statutory reform if we can get it to the criminal money laundering and money transmission.
Yes, I do want to add on to that conversation. I do very much agree that getting statutory reform or going through the courts, and the reason why is that as JW is pointing out, we have issues of prosecutorial discretion, and from a prosecutor, they generally think that they always make good decisions, and so giving them discretion will get the most justice because they'll only use it when it's appropriate. Nevertheless, it is a bad civic hygiene for a society to have it where everybody is a potential criminal, and then a prosecutor decides which one of these people you could go after, and there are many potential crimes out there. So you could have a situation in which there is a change in the guard, and there's a new set of officials who would be applying that discretion, and maybe they'll apply it more to your liking. That is not durable reform. That they can be changed again and come to a different situation. To get a durable protections for privacy, you need to have something which is a little bit more solid. So statutory reform, to actually put it in the laws that these regulators are charged with obeying, that gives much more of a permanence. And then, at least in the U.S. Constitutional system, if you're doing it based on constitutional principles, such as the code is speech, free expression arguments, or Fourth Amendment requirements, and we could get rid of the third party doctrine, right? That would change something at a very high level, so that even a statute, if Congress went into a wrong direction, then the Constitution provides a barricade for that. And elsewhere in the world, I don't want to focus solely on the U.S. There are also regulations and laws hitting these things, but in those countries, at least, there are still often international human rights treaties which talk about expression and privacy and some of these core rights that should, in my view at least, provide an opportunity to push those countries to respect these fundamental rights and not have statutes that interfere with them. But that's it. To get a durable reform, it's more than just having the regulators or prosecutors who are using their power wisely, but to get it so that that power is cabined in a appropriate way.
Yeah. And it gives us a unique opportunity to be in favor of the rule of law rather than what people think we are, which is in favor of anarchy or something. The rule of law should bind prosecutors. That's really important, that we're a government of men and women and not laws. No, the other way around. Michelle.
Peter, I wanted to close that loop because, one of the things that I have, conversations that I've had with a lot of developers is about the excitement with this new administration and the new people in charge, et cetera. But I've said, this is the long game, people. And this is why we do need statutory reform, that we potentially need codification of, guidances and binding on judges. As we've seen in some of these cases, it is swept aside completely in some cases by prosecutors charging criminal violations of those regulations. And so I think for the long term, and those of us that are longer in tooth can say this, 4 years is a very short period of time. And we don't know what will happen down the road. And so really focusing on getting protections in the law for this is really important. And in the meantime, until we have those protections, knowing that you always are going to have egos and people who want press releases, and to think that they're going to improve their careers by bringing some big case. to me, sadly, it's kind of the vanity, the evil and the vanity of the human race that is in every profession that can do, unfortunately, some damage when you're given power, such as a prosecutor is given. Thankfully, I think most people don't abuse that, but it only takes one when somebody's liberty is at stake. So
Couldn't agree more. I want to bring in some questions from the audience. This is first and foremost a developer conference, and we've spent a lot of time with a little bit of inside baseball about the courts and Congress and a little bit on the international side as well. But there's some good questions here that sort of focus the debate on like what should people be building and how should people talk about what they're building. And Michele, you had mentioned, I think in your first remark on this call about how, the longer discussion is not just about statutory clarity, but also about how can these tools actually improve our financial system in a way that regulators will actually understand, and how can we explain to them that what we're building is something that they're going to want in the long run, both for good consumer and investor protection, and even for addressing financial crime and money laundering. And so there's some interesting questions here. Somebody asked, shouldn't Zcash be more anarchists, cypherpunk, and oppose regulations? Do you think that's why some users prefer to support Monero? Is a private stablecoin that's okay for regulators without a backdoor even possible? And I think there's like I spend enough time with developers that I see where these questions are coming from. They're like, should we be like, it doesn't feel like we're being treated as a partner in all of this when there's just these prosecutions against people who are often, arrested after complying or cooperating with an investigation. It feels very antagonistic. Should we just run the other way and publish software as anonymous persons and just try and, live the cypherpunk anarchist ideal? Or should we be trying to cooperate with folks in government, come help them find solutions to problems that they have, like how bad identity and KYC has gotten even in the traditional financial system? So I want to open that up to this group to discuss. JW.
I would say both. And I would go back to my presentation at ZCon last year. And I always use Star Wars analogies. So the difference between being Mon Mothma and being Saw Gerrera, we need both. I'm on the Mon Mothma side because I'm doxxed. You know who I am. I'm a lawyer, an accountant. I'm licensed. I have to follow rules and stuff. So I'm on the Mon Mothma side. But I hope Saw Gerrera emerges out there on the frontier and is fighting in his way, anonymously, in the Zcash community. But I can't directly support you, but you do your thing. You be you, King. How does that work here? So tracking the stablecoin debate, right? Right now, I have some fears that the way the dynamic behind the Haggerty legislation is working in the US is that Senator Warner says, I'm a Democrat, I'm up for re-election, I like money, I might want to join your bill and become the pro-crypto Democrat senator, right? But what he's bringing to the table right now is, let's add a lot of AML stuff to this stablecoin bill. That worries me a little bit. My hope in those negotiations is Haggerty and crypto world stand together, says, you know what? You want to play? You just support our bill. We're not at AML. You want to support and you re-elect? Get in line and do what you're told. I hope that's how those negotiations work. But I am okay with designing a regulatory structure around stablecoin issuance at point of issuance that directly touches the banking system. I mean, I would like to totally redesign the entire architecture of financial regulation. But okay, as a starting point right there, that touch point, circling the banking system touch, that's fine. But I want it to still always be okay. First of all, I want make or die to be unregulated and do its own thing, which currently I think is true under the bill. I also want it to be okay for USDC after being minted by Circle effectively, and there being whatever backing makes regulators comfortable at the bank touch point from bank to Circle. That's fine. But I want, when USDC goes out in the world, goes out in the wild, I want it to be okay for USDC to touch the Zcash blockchain, get exchanged for a ZSA stable that's private, and then that becomes its own asset class. That's a private stable. I want that to always be okay. And I'm not sure in the negotiations with Warner that's going to be okay on the other side of that. So I'm very suspicious of those negotiations and how they come out, and make sure that stablecoin legislation leaves open the possibility of a ZSA stable that's a later kind of derivative of USDC. I hope that, and that's where I'm hopeful to help Zcash Foundation get involved in the advocacy. That's kind of what I'm doing when I'm here conspiring in DC, is stuff like that. So I'm hoping that as a foundation, as we're going to have some strategic discussions about the future, that's what I want to bring to the table with CF. It's more of that type of engagement.
Interesting choice of words, conspiring in DC, JW, but Paul.
Yeah, I just want to jump in and emphasize how important I think some of the things that JW just mentioned are. In my opinion, the opportunity to have a private stablecoin is just huge for Zcash, and it would be something that I think would completely demonstrate what we're all about. It would show that we're trying to empower people with privacy and allow them to use their finances in a very freedom-oriented way. And it would just be something that would be enormously popular among a large group of people, I believe, that would really solidify our position. And as far as I know, there's nothing in these proposed bills right now that prevent that. So I'm optimistic about that, but I think if there's any way possible to solidify that even more, to get some language in one of these bills that defends privacy, that would be a game changer. And it also aligns well with some of the things that we discussed earlier about 4 years being a very short period of time, and we need to prepare for the longer term. This legislation is really, really critical for stablecoins, and this is probably a time where we all need to really focus on coming up with a vision for delivering that, making it very clear that this is where we as an ecosystem are heading, and the value that we can bring, that we are very uniquely positioned to bring based on all the work we've been doing for years. So I really hope that this topic is top of mind for everyone in the ecosystem. And as far as the question about whether we need to be more cypherpunk and push back against the regulations, well, we're always pushing back. I mean, there's no question about that. But I want to live in a world where all this technology is available for everyone to use, and we're going to have governments. We need to be able to work with our governments. We need to be able to convince all of our friends and relatives that what we're doing is the right approach and why we're doing it. And I think the only way to do that is through productive discussions with policymakers and getting them on board. So that's why I think I'm doing what I do in DC, trying to build the community, always focusing on privacy. In fact, I want to announce that the next PGP meeting coming up next month is on stablecoins. And while we're not leading with this in the headline, what you're going to find if you watch it is that it's about private stablecoins. So this is a topic that I think is so critical that I'm really excited to be focusing on it in our meeting next time. So please join.
Yeah, those meetings are really valuable. It's a good place to just network with folks in DC. It's a good place to tune in and find out what folks are saying. So thank you for organizing those as always, Paul. On
So,
the
sorry, I just want to
yeah, go ahead.
I have to leave in about 10 minutes, but I wanted to get at least one piece in here before we go, which is looking at this question in the chat about what a developer of privacy software should do if they're contacted by, threatened by a government and told they can't tell anybody. Now, this, of course, is going to depend on which jurisdiction is contacting you, what the law is there. Like, there's not one answer to that question, but I think the right rule of law answer is to challenge that in court. And I just wanted to give an example. For many years ago, I was counsel for a company that was challenging a national security letter. And these are statutorily authorized letters that the FBI can issue without going to a judge, that tell the recipient to provide certain information and to not tell anybody, never speak of it again. Not put in your transparency report or what have you. And there are a lot of interesting questions about that. So we fought that in court. As when I was at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and as the company worked with us, and so we were able to know about it. And I think If the rule of law and the attorney-client relationship is solid in your jurisdiction, you should be able to talk to a lawyer about it. And took that up under the name In Re National Security Letter because they didn't want to have the game given away in the title of the case. But that went, I think reasonably well. That's why I can tell you that the company was Cloudflare. That was thing we wanted. And also Credo Mobile was a second one we were representing. But you can challenge these things in court if there is a good rule of law in the right jurisdiction. And I think that there should be limitations on when the government can secretly order you to do things and never speak to anyone about it. And those are easy to be removed because it's very intimidating to receive. There are a lot of national security letters that went out there, but only a few where people stood up and challenged it. And so that is, I think, the better way forward.
I completely agree with Kurt. My answer is that you need to talk to an attorney because there are legal options. One of the caveats that I want to give is that, as developers, you may have your either in-house counsel or maybe you have an outside counsel who handles your HR matters and your contracts and maybe your deals with your funding. And that may be a completely different skill set than the attorneys who are actually going to know how to fight these constitutional issues, criminal issues, the securities law, whatever it may be. I always like to give the example that you wouldn't want a dermatologist to perform brain surgery on you, and you wouldn't want a brain surgeon is not going to be very good at identifying if it's cancer by looking at your skin. And the same is true for lawyers. And I think relying upon folks that are working out in the space at either the trade associations, at organizations like Paul's and Peter's, who can give you guidance to those. JW has a great practice as well, to find the person that actually has the expertise in the area, and to not be worried about, I've only got this much runway to build. I don't have time to pay lawyers to go to court. These issues are often affecting the entire space. And so to the extent that, you can reach out to think tanks and trade associations and others who can help with funding in some of these lawsuits if they are, important issues that are going to affect everyone. And that's what we've seen Coin Center do. We have participated in funding some litigation at Andreessen, the electronic, the EFF that Kurt has worked with for years. So don't be discouraged, and do your homework. And don't, as you've always been told, be cooperative if it makes sense. But if you're unsure, talk to a lawyer.
Can I come back to just one small point, kind of building on what Paul was sharing and speaking about thinking about the future of the Zcash Foundation and advocacy and community building work that we can do at ZF that has always been in synergistic with the work that ECC does on this stuff as well. Last 4 years, I volunteered time playing defense on the policy side, in court sometimes. I want to play offense too. I want ZF to be a part of the effort to play offense. And I wasn't kidding earlier. It might have shock value the first time you hear it, but I wasn't kidding earlier when I said I want it to become an important part of the professional obligations of investment advisors and stockbrokers and accountants to have a privacy conversation as they talk to clients about crypto. That's going to be normalized at that retail level as a result of SEC reforms and CFTC reforms. So Zcash needs to be a part of that conversation. That's great for the community. If every accountant and investment advisor and stockbroker is talking about crypto privacy to their crypto clients in America in the next 5 years, that's great. That's a good thing for our community, right? And it's the right thing to do, and it's consistent with their professional standards. I'm going to have, in that national security conversation, why aren't we talking with national security experts about we have the ability to privately transmit funds? Half of the CIA General Counsel's office spends their whole day creating shell corps to try to send funds overseas. We can cut through all of that if you use Zcash. right? And foreign aid. Now, USAID is a whole political thing now, but that will eventually settle down, and USAID will continue to focus in a more streamlined way or whatever. But when that happens again, private crypto transmissions needs to be a part of that discussion, because half of that money is wasted on bureaucrats and warlords as it tries to get to the people it's actually supposed to help. Zcash Africa is working on getting wallets to people all across Africa. So I have an idea of, like, I want to teach the Gates Foundation, and I want to teach the Koch brothers, and I want to teach USAID and the CIA and stockbrokers about Zcash. And I think that that can be useful to our community and to all of them too. It might be crazy, but that's my big think idea for ZF going forward.
I love it, JW.
I can add on a little bit there.
I gotta take off, folks. Thanks for a great panel, and thanks for organizing.
Thank you, Kurt.
I
was actually gonna. Sorry, Paul. I'm just gonna bring in one of these questions just so people know that we are looking at their questions. And I think it's relevant probably to what you were about to say. The question is, privacy tech like Zcash will become increasingly important to protect individuals against authoritarian governments. So it'd be good to have a strong understanding of the ideological underpinnings behind Zcash's regulatory strategy. And I think what JW just said is right on the money, is that, we should be touting how these tools can save people's lives, can make people's lives better, even in corners of the world where they've never had the benefit of the rule of law or democracy. When I was testifying in front of House Financial Services, I think in like 2016 or 17, Representative Brad Sherman, who's not always been a good friend of crypto, said to me, what do we need this Bitcoin thing for? You talk about financial inclusion and reaching people in different corners of the world. You'll not find any place in the world, even the tallest mountaintop, where there isn't somebody with $100 bill. That's what we need for financial inclusion. And I was like, and listening to the conversation today, I'm like, yes, you're right. There should be a digital $100 bill. It should be a stable coin, and it should be issued on a private blockchain, because it is the proliferation of a stable potential global currency in the form of a bearer instrument, like a $100 bill that actually saves people's lives in the long run. But yeah, I don't know if Brad will be on board with all of that, with Representative Sherman. Sorry, I shouldn't call him Brad.
That strategy point is exactly what I was wanting to talk about, because for those who think about what I said earlier, you may walk away with the impression that all I really care about is a private stable coin, and that's not the case at all. From a strategic perspective, to me, that is a bridge to a crypto-based economy that we have to step in that direction, and this is a step that the society, I believe, is going to be comfortable with. It's going to be something that they relate to the way they've been using money in the past. It's going to be digital dollars, and if they could be private, that would be a way that we could solidify our position, and then we can continue moving down the path to a crypto-based economy. And that is a more fundamental change. But just to be clear, that is exactly where I think we need to be headed. But that is such a longer term vision that I think we have to really focus on the short term right now. And the time now is for stable coins.
Got another good question here. Isn't Tornadocash banned over money laundering? How can Zcash avoid the same fate? Does someone want to take this? I can also take this. Yeah, I'll do a quick take on this one, because there's a few things that are sort of relevant to Coin Center. So the Tornadocash sanctions, which actually were announced at the ZCon we did live in Las Vegas, are what sort of started this whole battle over the legality of Tornadocash. And when OFAC, which is part of Treasury that does, sanctions law and tells Americans who they can and cannot transact with, they added the Tornadocash immutable pool contracts, which were the privacy feature, the tech that actually allowed you to have private transactions on Ethereum, to the list of sanctioned persons. In the wake of that, we at Coin Center started working on a legal challenge to bring a lawsuit against OFAC, saying you're not allowed to just add a smart contract, especially an immutable smart contract, to your sanctions list, because you're only supposed to add persons, like bad foreign persons, ideally, in oppressive regimes to the sanctions list, not autonomous software. And the Tornadocash smart contract is not a person, nor is it even the property of one of these sanctioned persons because it's immutable on the Ethereum blockchain running out on its own. And so that those legal arguments culminated in two lawsuits. In the Fifth Circuit in Texas, the Van Loon plaintiffs, not Coin Center, were in the 11th Circuit in our lawsuit. They actually got to judgment first, and the Court of Appeals said, "You're right. You can't add immutable smart contracts to the OFAC list." And we're still waiting for a remedy from the district court on that ruling. What this all means in legalese is that actually pretty soon, not yet, don't go sending your money to the immutable pools yet, those usage of those immutable smart contracts will no longer be banned in the United States because of some really good lawyering that I can take a little bit of credit for because we're one of the two lawsuits. And then, so how does that feed into to like Zcash's regulatory strategy? This I think also is relevant to the earlier question about cypherpunk. To me, the reason why I was happy to join the board of the Zcash Foundation was that I trusted this community to work like Satoshi Nakamoto. Like that's how it is to be cypherpunk. It's not that you're going to go out and break the law, because if you look at everything Satoshi ever did, he didn't break the law. He found a way to build an incredible new system for financial inclusion, human flourishing, personal autonomy, simply by releasing software, which is not just legal, but actually a protected act in this country. And he didn't need to go operate a server that he was in control of, that he could always, like have discretion over or control over, that could be treated as money transmission. He did it all in just the most authentically cypherpunk way possible by just shipping really cool code. And so like I think that's still Zcash community's biggest advantage, is that we don't mess around with half measures. We build real decentralized tech. We don't put human agency in the loop, not just because we're afraid that the person who has that human agency would get arrested and forced to do things that would violate people's privacy, but just because it's the right way to build good tech. Like we shouldn't have to trust people in order to transact online. We should just be able to transact peer-to-peer with bearer instrument like assets like we do in the real world. So that's my little sermon about cypherpunk ideals. Does anyone want to chime in on that topic? Otherwise, we can move to another question too. Okay. Oh, Michelle?
No, I actually I was just taking a breath, but I guess what I could say, look, this community knows privacy and cares about privacy, however it is that you want to advocate. And so I think making sure that you're having those conversations, not just about, the legal stuff and the philosophical fighting, which is important, but really trying to serve as translators to those folks that are actually making decisions about what the laws are going to be, or if you have an opportunity to go in and talk to a regulator, or if, God forbid, you find yourself stuck in a conversation with a prosecutor wanting to actually have a conversation where you can have a conversation with them, and figuring out how you can express in an analogy that a computer scientist is not going to understand, like something that they're going to be able to relate to from a privacy perspective, because everybody wants privacy. That's what we do in all these court filings. There are lots of arguments about the law and why it's wrong and this and that and the other. But then there's a bunch of amicus filers, the friends of the court that aren't litigants in the cases, who will file just to talk about privacy and why this technology may be important, so that the court is also considering that alongside the law. And so these are things that are important to be talking about. And then thinking about, where am I operating? Where am I employing people? Who are my congressmen and my senators and their staff? Maybe I should have a meeting with them and talk to them about what I'm building and why I'm excited about it, and the importance of privacy, and how many people you're employing in their district where they have votes. These things you can be doing, because privacy is something that fundamentally everybody understands is not going to be against. You just have to frame the technology and what it's doing in a way that they can understand and relate to.
So we've got really basically just one question that we haven't addressed yet, and it's actually a good segue into maybe one topic we haven't touched enough in this panel. The question is, could the panel discuss the recent changes with travel rules in various countries? And if no one's comfortable speaking specifically about the travel rule in this panel, I think I do want to open it up to a larger discussion of, what do we see in the evolution of policy in the US that's contrasted abroad? What are the best things we see from other jurisdictions, like say the European Union? What are the things that are maybe more concerning, and what's the differential on how friendly the US is versus the rest of the world right now?
I can just briefly say that one of the things that you might want to look at are what are the standard setting bodies doing, because a lot of countries, frankly, they either don't have the bandwidth or they want to kind of do what everybody else is doing. And the standard setting bodies where they actually send representatives from their countries to participate, they're the ones who are actually kind of coming up with the non-binding, but sometimes they have teeth, rules of the road for these member states to actually create regulations. So I think looking at what they're doing, and to the extent that you have opportunities to engage with those representatives in those member states, whatever jurisdiction you may have a lot of business or maybe operating in, that's worthwhile, and paying attention to that. And then secondly, I think a lot of the countries have been, I joked about the book reports, but particularly in the EU, they do a lot of like writing papers and consultation, and it takes a long time. And this is kind of their thing. But the nice thing is it gives an opportunity for people to actually respond to those consultations. And sometimes they're actually asking pretty technical questions that would give people the opportunity to be able to engage. So there's a lot of stuff happening. It tends to be happening in the standard setting bodies right now. But countries are one by one slowly rolling stuff out, and but it's happening very slow. So I think we're really going to have to see what the individual countries within these areas, whether it's Asia or the EU or the UK, who kind of does things on their own. And then there may be opportunities to engage with those individual jurisdictions before their laws become final.
I think depending on how the travel rule it continues to evolve overseas, and God forbid if it ever comes here, how it would be implemented here. The Zcash transparent and shielded transaction flexibility is a tremendous advantage for us. I mean, I don't really, if the only result of it is I need a burner transparent address pre sending it into a SEX and post, but then I get to go shielded the whole time. That's like a game of Marco Polo where I have gills, right? So I yell Marco, and then I get to just swim underwater for as long as I want to. If that's how it stays, and I understand that how to be as how it is in Europe, I don't care about transparency immediately before I send to a central exchange, or immediately after. I can do a burner transparent wallet easily, and then immediately go to shielded, and then I'm good, and then I do everything in shielded that I want to do. If that's still how it's implemented, hopefully that doesn't change and get worse, and have like post immediate withdrawal hop monitoring or something. That worries me. For other chains, I can't say the same thing, and travel rules a lot more dangerous for other chains. And I don't love the fact that Nota Bene, a travel rule compliance group, met with the SEC Crypto Task Force a couple weeks ago and lobbied them to implement some version of the travel rule, even though they don't have to. Shame on you, Nota Bene. I'm calling you out right now. I hope the SEC ignores you on that effort. That's my perspective on it.
It's fortuitous that this came up. Somebody just snuck a question in here towards the end. Is the transparent pool a liability or an advantage in terms of dodging adversarial regulatory bullets? If it's an advantage, what's needed to preserve that advantage while deprecating the transparent pool? It's a very Zcash specific topic, which I love. Paul.
Yeah, my feeling about this is that the transparent pool becomes much less important as we have good bridges and we have ways to get in and out of our ecosystem. And if we had that and if it were robust, then I think I would feel confident about the transparent pool being a liability for our project, and that it just creates too much confusion, too much dissonance about what we're about and how you use our crypto. It's already complicated enough, people moving into the cryptocurrency space, not understanding what all the cryptos are about, and then you try to explain to them that, oh yeah, you can do transparent here, you can do private, here's all these different address types. To me, that is a major impediment and really gets in the way of our narrative as a privacy-centric cryptocurrency.
Don't we fix some of that with defaults in wallets, though? Privacy defaults, shielded defaults in wallets, Paul? Some of it.
Perhaps, and I think that Zashi has really done great at this, and it's made a huge difference in adoption. It's one of the reasons why I feel more comfortable in trying to onboard normies now, because I feel like I can do it in a way that is not going to be so overwhelming for them. But it's still, to me, it's way too confusing, and I just don't think it's that helpful to us, candidly. I think, once we have ways to get in and out that are not dependent on exchanges, then we just don't need it. And I don't know that it provides that much benefit to us.
To me, a sensible implementation of something like the travel rule wouldn't rely on the existence of transparent addresses. We've gotten pretty egghead here talking about the travel rule, but the core issue that I think the travel rule is trying to get at from a public policy standpoint is our financial institutions that are trusted entities sharing the right information between themselves and other financial institutions so that we can track the flow of illicit funds through the economy, especially through trusted entities who get the benefit of the rule of law and so should therefore also, cooperate with lawful investigations into the misuse of their systems. But that shouldn't at all rely on the existence of naked, transparent transactions on chain, because God knows, the Swift network isn't nakedly transparent. And yes, yet the Swift network can be compliant with the travel rule. I think what we want is to move towards the world that, Zuko has articulated very well, others have articulated very well, which is selective disclosure. The default should be private. And then when you are willing to share the details of your transaction or obligated under law, but this would be like a subpoena to you or a warrant to you, a search of your home, you should be able to selectively reveal those details. And if you're, say, taking money from the Tornadocash immutable pools and bringing them to Coinbase, that shouldn't immediately be an off-the-table transaction that Coinbase just rejects or is banned under OFAC from processing. The Tornadocash devs had a compliance tool, which is kind of like our selective disclosure tools in our view keys in Zcash, where they can say, look, actually, yeah, it's coming from Tornadocash, but you can see if I unblind it that it's just my income from my software development job that I didn't want the guy in the cubicle next to me to know about, because he's going to then ask for a raise and then he doesn't deserve it. Like all the normal reasons for privacy. And then just unblind to the right person at the right time. That's what human dignity and agency are about. It's not about being a guy in a ski mask all the time. It's just about not oversharing like the history of your romantic life with your dentist when you're there, or not like randomly blurting out your insurance information when you're on a date. Like we have dials for how much we share, and we should have those dials online, not just in our physical world. I think we're coming up pretty close to time, and we've done a really good job, I think, answering, all of these questions I've got here in the chat. I think maybe, we'll have a nice little cushion to have some final remarks from each of you of anything that we didn't cover or anything that you want to share, just as far as like your, maybe we'll try and make it optimistic about what's coming next in public policy and crypto. JW?
Sure. Got to run to class at 1:50. So I just want to thank everybody at Coin Center, ECC, and my friend Paul. Michelle, good to meet you. At A16Z, love the white papers and stuff that Miles is doing, and really glad to have more. As much as I'm a critic of DOJ prosecutorial discretion, critic of the discretion, love the prosecutors who come into crypto. We need more of you. We need like 1,000 more of you. We need, I think, surround me with former prosecutors in crypto fighting for crypto. I hope that we get more involved in the advocacy side as an entity as ZF. I think we can do community building at the same time as advocacy, and there are synergies between those two things, and I'm hopeful that's a part of ZF's future. Really good to be with this community, especially in these difficult times. I feel like this is where the cypherpunk legacy flame is, so I feel like I'm being kept warm next to that flame. That's a comfortable place to be. So thanks for everybody in the Zcash community and everything you do. Love you guys.
Thanks, JW. Paul?
Well, I'd just like to say how happy I am that JW is in our community and is doing the kind of things he just described and has plans to do more advocacy on behalf of our ecosystem. I'm very excited about working with him. I'm excited about where the foundation might be headed and for what I believe is a lot more cohesion and cooperation in the Zcash ecosystem, driving towards common goals that really help us move forward. I just think it feels to me like kind of like an inflection point for our project that has been building a long time. So I really am optimistic, despite some of the stuff that I really want to ignore that's happening in politics. There's so many reasons to be optimistic right now from a building perspective and from being able to deliver privacy in this environment and with our regulatory environment that I think this is a time for us to stand up and really execute. So I'm excited about that.
And Michelle, I'll let you have the last word.
Thank you for having me and for not throwing any virtual tomatoes at me. You guys have been kind to let me bring a different perspective, but I think I share the same passion as all of you for the importance of privacy in our online lives and our financial activities and in everything that we do. And I think I've said this before, it's important for you as developers who are actually working on these things and building companies and employing people to be thinking about how can I actually build something that's going to address potentially the policy objectives that aren't unreasonable, meaning none of us want to facilitate North Korean to build bombs or people that are making money off of child exploitation. And I think arming ourselves with the data and the facts about what the realities of that are, is, so that we can shoot down the false narratives that's all that this space is about, when we know very well that that is not the truth. And I think arming yourselves with arguments that actually have been pretty well crafted by a lot of hardworking developers and policy folks and attorneys out there, and just amplifying them. Because I have found that when you have a person who's a skeptic or even an opponent, and they hear something that's rational and has data behind it over and over and over again, actually, eventually, they sometimes actually turn the corner. I've seen it. So visit a16zcrypto.com. We have a ton of policy documents on these topics. Privacy is obviously very important to us as a firm and specifically in the crypto fund. And go out there and be warriors for privacy with all of the information and the talents that you have, and with the gifts that have been given to you by those that have fought before you. So thanks for having me, and keep building and stay positive.
Thanks, Michelle. And as for me, if any of the cases that I've mentioned, the Tornadocash actions, the Llewellyn v. Garland case about unlicensed money transmission, if any of those impact litigation or other policy efforts that my organization, Coin Center, are interesting to you, please visit coincenter.org, where we have all of our educational and advocacy materials available. And I love the Zcash community. I do miss being on the board of the foundation. I love the people who want to build in this space. If you ever have concerns or questions or think you could, explain this better than I'm explaining it to someone in Congress, shoot me an email at peter@coincenter.org. I really want to support this space. So thank you all for tuning in. I think it's been a great discussion. Hopefully it was useful as you continue to build.